first step of getting an ADHD diagnosis is that the people around you notice the symptoms. But what if they don't? In general, a lot of people think that people with ADHD are always hyperactive and that they can control their impulsive behaviors. But with girls, it's different. You see, girls display the symptoms a lot more differently than boys do. For example, a girl can be hyperactive, but it's mostly mentally. There is just a lot going on in her head. And this can cause exaggerated emotional responses. A girl can also appear withdrawn due to her ADHD. But the problem is that those symptoms are just often seen as characteristics of the girl instead of real signs that she might have ADHD. So what happens is that the girl often doesn't get diagnosed, and if she does, it's mostly later on in her life, maybe even just in adulthood. So, I'm Fleur Pastoor, and I'm a girl who got pretty lucky in terms of diagnosis. So, I was in primary school, and everything was going well. You know, I got good grades, I wasn't a disturbance in class, so the teachers never really complained about me. They didn't see any problems. I didn't either, but now that I look back on it, I do. You see, I had a habit of procrastinating. I mean, I had a week to do my homework, and it was just 1 page. It was nothing, but I always used to do it the night before the due date. I was also a very sensitive girl. I mean, things such as loud and irritating noises made me really mad, and maybe even cry. I was also a very slow worker. This was due to the fact that I was very easily distracted and also perfectionist. Well, I still am, which really doesn't make things any better. But I really began noticing the problems when I was in 8th grade, when Corona hit. We had to go into lockdown, and suddenly you had to follow all of your lessons at home, and you had to do all of the studying on your own. I was already having trouble focusing on my studies, and now even more, which also caused me to have a lack of motivation. Luckily, my dad and my mom noticed these problems I was having. My dad just got diagnosed with ADHD a few years earlier, so he knew what ADHD actually looked like. So my parents decided to contact a psychologist. So after a few tests and some months later, it turned out that I did have ADHD. You see, I do wish I had been diagnosed earlier. I mean, it just would have prevented so many problems and frustrations. I was always frustrated with the fact that my brain didn't work like a normal brain should. But now, since I had my diagnosis, I finally knew why. But still, a diagnosis only solves a part of the problem. I still often feel misunderstood. And a lot of people with ADHD do, even by my own friends, which is not their fault. Otherwise, I wouldn't be friends with them anymore. Anyway, there was this instance when we were walking through the city, and there was this big square filled with people, and I already knew that I was going to be very uncomfortable. But we had to walk through it. I mean, there was no other way. So we walked through, and well, there were indeed a lot of people and loud noises. And then came a siren, an ambulance siren, which honestly just tipped me off the cliff. I mean, I started to be overwhelmed, and I felt trapped in my own emotions almost. And then I did what I just had to do. I cried. I mean, I was mad, I was very irritated, and I was just sad. I mean, it felt like I was just being dramatic, which I know might sound stupid because, well, this is just how my brain works, and I should accept it. But I just felt like I ruined the trip for my friends. But luckily, they love me, I hope. So they moved me to a quieter spot. They handled it very well. But still, I just couldn't shake the feeling that I ruined something for them. Which brings me to another moment. I was doing grocery shopping with my girlfriend, which just sounds like a daily task, right? But I always have had lots of troubles doing groceries. I mean, there's just a lot going on there in the store. You hear the beeping of the cashiers, and there's just a lot of people around you, and you have to get things off of a list, and if you forget them, you might have to go back, and well, it's all just everything in one store, which I don't like. So I had the luck that I am basically going to the same grocery store for my whole life. So I know what the outlay looks like. And so what I do before I have to go shopping, I make this kind of like plan in my head, right? So first I make a list of the items that I need, otherwise I will definitely forget them. And then I kind of like mentally walk through the store. You know, I just grab the things I need, maybe, you know, a few extra snacks, which can never hurt. But the problem is when I have to go to another store and I don't know the outlay. So we went grocery shopping in my girlfriend's town. And I just felt very lost. I mean, the outlay didn't make any sense to me. I mean, why the hell would the meat be in front? And why? It just, God, it irritated the hell out of me, honestly. So I had to find all of these things, well, together with my girlfriend, but still. I felt so overwhelmed and, well, I just really started to panic. My girlfriend did notice this, and after, you know, the kind of like incident, I had to explain to her why I was reacting the way I was. Luckily, she did understand, and now I hope she still does. But still, you know, it isn't just nice to always have to explain why you react to things the way you do. So this is why things must change. You know, there's just so much misinformation about ADHD and the actual complications it might bring. And there's just very little real information about ADHD, especially in girls. You know, and I wish that people just knew things more, so that people, you know, neurotypical people could understand people like me. People who have problems or have very emotional responses to things that might seem pretty small to, you know, the normal brain. So my advice is that schools teach these things, teach ADHD and other neurodevelopmental disorders to the students. So that not only the late diagnoses can be avoided by recognizing the symptoms earlier, but also that neurotypicals might understand people like me, neurodivergents, better, so that we don't always have to explain why we react to certain things the way we do. So I truly hope that people like me, neurodivergent people, have felt heard by my speech, and I truly hope that neurotypical people have learned something and that they now, you know, try to understand us better. Thank you for listening, and this was my speech.